So in the yesterday session, what we discussed overall here it is, it's all about how we are sending data, JSON data as part of request, or how we are handling JSON data from the request, how we are making JSON to Java conversion. So that information we discussed in yesterday session. So that means a client application. So a client application while sending request to our REST service or to execute our REST service, so they are going to send JSON data. So that means we have to make sure while implementing the REST service itself, we have to support JSON data. So that means we have to assume like when JSON data coming from the client, so how you are taking that JSON data from your logic and how you are accepting the data from the JSON and whatever, then the rest of the logic has to be executed. This is all we have to implement in this scenario. So these are all scenarios we have to implement in this scenario. So that means as a Spring Boot developer or REST API developer now, we have to consider like, okay, this API, whatever, for example, we take in sign up. So this service is going to accept request in the JSON data format, as well as if any data is available, that is also shared as a JSON response like that. So in such case, we as a developer, we have to think like if client sent request with JSON data, how the JSON is being handled at our Spring Boot application level. So generally what we understood earlier as per MVC architecture or as part of our Spring Boot, whenever a request came from any client application, it will always reach to controller. So that means while the request reaching to the controller, the data in the form of JSON, in the form of JSON. But actually our entire Java Spring Boot application is completely like Java application. So nothing but Java can understand only Java objects. In the runtime level, what Java can understand? Java knows only objects oriented, objects, right? So that means what we have to do is we have to make sure this JSON data is converted to Java object. So this has to be done automatically for every request. Then once I am ready with Java object, I can do anything. So I can do anything. I can forward the data service to repository to DB. This is all we can do that. So that means this is the primary thing you have to take care here it is. Similarly, while sending the response also, okay, sometime I mean while sending the response also, client is always expecting JSON data. Client sent the data as JSON and client is also expecting JSON data in the JSON format like this. Response also expecting in JSON. So that means in this case, for example, assume you are having 100 employee details as 100 objects, 100 employee objects. Then what will happen? This 100 employee objects has to send this information to client. In, in which format? JSON format. No, JSON format. So nothing but what you have to do all these objects Java. So this is again Java objects, right? So in this case, again you have to make sure the conversion from Java to JSON, and finally JSON is sending to the client like that. So that means with respect to request JSON to Java, with respect to response JSON Java to JSON. This conversion we have to enable as part of our Spring Boot application. So it's a mandatory. Otherwise, you can't deal with JSON. You can't send request. You can't receive request. You can't handle the request, or you can't send the response in the JSON expected format like that. So that's why, with respect to Spring Boot framework or Spring framework, I explained you yesterday. Yes. So we are already have some third-party libraries. Nothing but some kind of third-party frameworks. Third party means out of the Spring Boot guys. Simple point of view, or out of the Java like that. So it's we have some of the open source libraries or frameworks which are already implemented logic like converting to JSON to Java. Similarly, Java to JSON conversion point of view. We are already have a lot of open source frameworks or okay libraries in the market. So we have to utilize one thing and we have to make sure that Java to JSON, JSON to Java conversion here. So here, what if it is Spring framework? Spring will always have only Spring related jar files. Spring will not give any third party jar files. So we have to identify respective Jackson jar files, versions and everything, and we have to add it to pom.xml file. Then internally, okay, Spring framework will utilize that Jackson API jar files and it will start initiating, okay, JSON to Java, Java to JSON conversion while sending the request. I mean, while receiving the request, while sending the response, internally it will utilize this JSON jar files. Okay, JSON jar files, and it will start conversion from JSON to Java, Java to JSON, like every object, for every object. Okay, yesterday I shown you in the Flipkart web application also, right? We received response in the JSON format. We received response in the JSON format. See, this is all JSON format. So this assumes Spring Boot is the backend application for Flipkart. Then Spring Boot what done? Converted entire Java objects to, this is all data available in the database, and nothing but it is converted into Java objects, and finally Java objects to JSON format point of view, because this is all we received as response yesterday, right? Like that. So this will utilize this. But when it comes to Spring Boot, I mentioned yesterday as you no need to worry about this JSON jar files or third party libraries, because Spring Boot is a, just like Spring Boot is all about a utility framework on top of Spring, nothing but it came up with already all internal required third party jar files also. So that means Spring Boot knows that, now team knows that nowadays everything is REST services implementation, and as part of REST also, the first priority is JSON. So that's why Spring Boot framework, when you added the web starter, automatically what will happen is the moment you created Spring Boot web application, it will come up with the JSON jar files. So I shown you that. So you don't need to add any extra JSONs and all. Okay, it's already there. JSON core, annotation, data bind, all these things. So these are all 5 to 6 jar files you require to deal with this JSON API or framework and all. Now the point is, okay, fine. So jar files wise, you are okay. You don't need to do anything. As a developer, we don't need to do anything. When it comes to conversion point of view, JSON to Java, Java to JSON point of view, do we need to do anything in this case? So with respect to Java to JSON, I said, right? And as well as I mentioned as JSON to Java, right? So in this both of the cases, do we need to do any extra configuration or coding for every request and response point of view? Means answer is no. We don't need to do anything. So that means internally this Spring Framework controller layer is going to take care of Java to JSON conversion, JSON to Java conversion. We have to do something, okay, but it's not like huge coding and all. You don't need to do anything. But yes, to make sure Java to JSON, JSON to Java part. See, when JSON to Java, guys, it's all about request while you're receiving the request. Think always in the Spring Boot application backend application point of view. So when you will get request data as JSON, and finally you have to make it as Java. So that means while you are receiving the request, right? So when this will happen, while response. So Java to JSON means while you are sending the response, generally you will have Java objects and you have to convert to JSON, and then you will share JSON data with the client as a response. This is the possible scenarios. So here we have again two annotations to make sure this configuration or this conversion should be enabled internally like that. We have two annotations. One is @request body, @request body annotation, and to achieve Java JSON to Java conversion, sorry, Java to JSON conversion, okay, with respect to response point of view. Now you know this annotation earlier. We discussed along with @controller combination. @controller combination level, when you want to make an endpoint as a REST service in a controller class, then you have to add response body annotation. So now you will realize why you added @response body in a regular controller class. You will try to understand now. Okay. But similarly, when you are receiving request, and to handle this request, that means when you are receiving JSON data, to handle that data, you have to convert to Java, right? So then we have to utilize this annotation as part of our REST service implementation. So I'll tell you again with respect to flow. Let's try to understand. Okay, now my next point is, I said JSON, not only JSON, Java will support XML also, right? So what I mentioned, so I mentioned as Yeah, give me a moment. Okay. So what I mentioned earlier is, so in REST services implementation, either JSON data format or XML data format we have to use to exchange data between one application to another application, or while we are creating the REST services also, we have to implement REST service like based on the requirement only, whether it is JSON or maybe it has to support XML or both. So it's up to your choice. Only JSON or only XML or both. So like that, if your requirement is demanding JSON, then the story is whatever I explained. Okay, JSON point of view. If your requirement is demanding no, this REST service, one of the REST service has to go with only XML request and response format point of view, like that. Okay, so if you have this kind of scenarios, for example, assume XML data format. Okay, JSON point of view, I explained you all these things. Internally, what Jackson definitely you have to take it. Now, when it comes to the XML, what you have to do that? What you have to do that? So when it comes to XML, what you have to? Maybe your REST service you have to implement in the XML point of view. So that means in this case, XML to Java, Java to XML, Java to XML. So with respect to request, you are receiving XML data, and with respect to response, you have to convert Java objects to XML data. So in such case, how this conversion will happen? In this case also, how this conversion should happen? Yes, as it is same guys. Only thing is now, however you identified third party libraries to convert Java to JSON, similarly, we have to identify third party libraries where it is enabling conversion between XML to Java and XML to Java, Java to XML point of view. So yes, we have to do that. So it's all about XML converters, Java, XML to Java, Java to XML, like that. You have to identify some converter libraries. Yes. So in this case, Jackson itself having XML also, and as well as we have something like JaxB, Java XML beans, something like that, JaxB. We will discuss. We will take one example after we are done with JSON formats. Our focus more on JSON only. One example we will take with respect to XML also, but after some time. But you have to remember, like, now my point again here it is. So what I said, if it is JSON point of view, Jackson jar files you can utilize, and by using that JSON to Java, Java to JSON conversion, you can achieve it. And that is by default added in the Spring Boot. Okay, those jar files by default added in the Spring framework, Spring Boot especially. Now when it comes to XML point of view, we don't have default by default this one. Okay, by default these libraries not available. That means why Spring Boot thought here it is, what Spring Boot framework thought here it is, majority of the people implementing REST services via JSON data. So let's make JSON is available by default, like reducing headache to the developer. So in this case, why they are not added by default is, why not added here it is, their intention is very less amount of time, very rare cases people will go with XML configuration. So that's why unnecessarily we have to provide XML related jar files, and why we have to give lot of okay libraries unnecessarily being added to the project, like that. It is not added. But what Spring Boot is saying in this case is, when your requirement is demanded XML REST services data format, XML data format as part of REST APIs. So it is saying like just add those jar files manually. That's all. And remaining again conversion point of view and all, it will take care. So we have to take care of adding those jar files manually. So one small thing you have to take care in case if you are expecting XML. So this overall scenario we will discuss later. This overall thing we will discuss later, because our focus is more on JSON, and even everybody is following JSON only. So if you are good with JSON, it's nothing. Only thing is you are sending data instead of like this, you will send in the XML format. That's all. So instead of sending data like this, what you will do is you will send like this. You will send like this. That's all. But finally, you are sending same data like that. We will see one example later. Now let's come back to the example implementation in this case. Okay, so what we are going to do right now is based on our sign up example only. So we will implement a REST service. So now finally what we are going to do here it is we are implementing. So my requirement is now understand. Now we are entering into coding. So what is our final thing is please implement a service or REST service whatever it is. Okay, by using above JSON properties. Okay, or payload. Sometimes, not sometimes, most of the times, this overall will be called as payload, guys. JSON payload, a request payload, response payload. I mean, people will use the terminology in the real-time projects. Okay, even I will also in the flow, I will also use this terminology when I'm explaining in the flow. Usually, I'll use this word. That's why I'm giving you payload is nothing but the overall JSON data format or the overall JSON sample JSON whatever you are having, right? That JSON payload. So it will be called a JSON payload. Now, can I call it as a JSON payload means? Yes, it is a JSON payload. The overall JSON message, you are going to call it as a payloads. So if you are using that payload at request time, then it is a JSON request payload. If you are receiving some JSON message, JSON data as part of response, then people will call it as response payload. So it's a response payload. Similarly, tomorrow when you are dealing with XML point of view, yeah, I can call it as XML payload. So that payload in the nothing but especially in the REST APIs or web services point of view, this terminology will see. So payload is nothing but the content of the request, either request or response. Body of the request or response. Simple. That's all. So it will be called as payload. So now what I'm trying to say is for these 5 properties, we have to implement a REST service. So implementing means what we have to do. Step number 1. So we have to make sure if any client sending request with if any client sending request with JSON data. So any client means what? If any client means it might be your front end application or it might be any other programming language applications also. Maybe .NET, that's what I said, right? .NET application or Python application or maybe another Spring Boot application or another Java application, etc., etc., etc. Whoever send it doesn't matter for you. Whoever is calling your REST service, it's not matter for you. You are working for this area. That's all. So in this area, calling your REST service or sending request to your REST services can be done by any application. Don't think always only by front end. That's what my point here it is. Tomorrow, when you are working for REST services, sorry, microservices, this is microservice 1, microservice 2 with respect to backend itself. Nothing but Spring Boot 1, Spring Boot 1. Spring Boot application, Spring Boot application. .NET application, Spring Boot application. Python application, Spring Boot application. In microservices architecture will happen same thing. So that's why what I'm trying to say is don't think like you are going to get request always from the front end. It might be front end, it might be something else. It doesn't matter for us. Imagine simply like, okay, in this area, this is what you have to imagine like, okay, if any client sent data in the JSON format, read it, process it, and give the response back like that. That is what you have to think. But who is sending the request and all, it doesn't matter for us like that. Okay. So that is what I'm trying to say here. It is if any client sending request with JSON data, so especially these properties are most important. So I'll show you that. If okay, so okay, any JSON data, sending request with any JSON data. So what you have to do is read the data and make sure data inserted into database. Nothing but what you are doing finally, data inserted into database means you are making sign up operation is successful. Now in this case, okay, assume like front end only. Now front end team, React team implemented a form like this and they integrated this REST service. Okay, see here now. Okay, so see, understand now. So this is what we front end and this is what back end, right? Now what will happen? The REST service, what we are implemented as a backend developer, what we are going to implement as a backend developer. So that service information we will give it to the front end team like that after implementation. But before implementation, like we have to imagine or we have to think like, okay, the data is always coming as a JSON point of view like that. We have to think and we have to implement our REST service. Okay. So in this case, what I said, the data comes as a JSON in the request body level. Now we have to implement this REST service called as sign up. So how to implement it? Let's go back to our application. Uh, Give me a second. I'll just rename it. I'll create a new application so that you can have. Okay. So see here, I'm creating freshly new project. File new Spring Boot starter project. Yeah, give a project name, REST services, request body, JSON request body. Okay, so these are all you know that. If you want, you can take anything else. Okay. Okay, Lombok JPA. So JPA for DB because we are going to make sure directly database also integrated and dev tools. So these are all we know that. See, we are not doing any extra jar files and simply Spring Web module for REST services implement. Finish it. Okay, so my application got created now. Yeah, so this is the one. So let me do one thing. Okay, so this is the application we created. So let's add the DB properties. See, first example, I will go step by step very carefully. Next 1 hour it will take, no problem, but let's take it. Okay, so we need DB properties, right? Okay, instead of typing, I will copy paste. Okay, these are all you know that. So I can copy instead of wasting the time. Okay, so in this case also, I just given port number as 8899. If you are not given 8080, if you are given context for this, okay, this is all you know that. Okay, cool. Common story. Now let's come back to the implementation. So what is the step number one you have to do based on this backend implementation point of view to create a REST service? First of all, make sure controller class. Okay, create controller class. Create controller class. Okay, point one. So let's go here. New class and then followed by user user operations or user accounts, whatever it is. User accounts controller. Please add meaningful class names. Okay. So by saying the class name itself, we have to understand whether it is a controller class or maybe service class like that. Okay. So let's see here. Okay, cool. Now I'll make this as a REST controller. Okay, fine. Now let's write a basic method. So in this case, what response you have to send in this case? So the request point of view, this is data will come, and expected response is if everything is good, I need response in the string format. Okay, like user created successfully when there is no email, or else user account already existed. Out either of them I need to get. Okay, either of them I have to get it. Okay, so you just need to get a plain text message like this as a response. It's not a JSON response, guys. Only plain text string format. That's all. JSON we will see later. I'll involve response with JSON point of view. Okay, let's see. Create controller class. Okay, fine. And then let's write a method like response. I'm expecting in the string format. Use user sign up. Okay, cool. Now let's take return null for dummy. We'll replace it. Okay, now what you have to do here, we know the story. So request mapping annotation we have to take. So how will you decide which method, which HTTP method you have to take? So in this case, as per our guidelines, sign up means what? User account creation. So that means for the first time user is creating his account means his personal details, his email ID, his password being inserted into DB. So it's a create operation. Yeah, it's a create operation. So that's why as part of create operation point of view, we discuss like it's better to go always post. Okay, it's always post. Recommended one is post. Okay. So now in this case again, whether you are going with request mapping annotation, it's up to your choice, and you given method equal to post. Or if you are going with directly shortcut annotation, post mapping annotation, see here post mapping annotation is also you can see specific handler method. Okay, so we know this story. I'm directly using post mapping. So fine. And then I'm making here path equal to path equal to. So assume I'm making here as a request mapping. So why I'm making you know that slash user. So whenever I'm expecting this endpoint as user slash sign up, then you don't need to give user again here. It's a common for all REST service, all the handler methods inside this controller class. You have to use it as a prefix. So now simply what I will do, sign up slash sign up, sign up. Okay, so path is this one. Now in this case, come back to diagram again. What is our expectation? This data comes as a JSON pointer. So that means what this front end team will do is, okay, they will see guys, what front end team will do is they will implement logic like, they will implement this logic like once the user clicking on the sign up button, all this data is converted into this respective JSON payload. So this knowledge as a front end developer, they knows that, or you should have it if you are a full stack developer also. So that means what will happen the moment user clicked on sign up after entering all these details, immediately what will happen is a request object will be created to send it to controller, sorry, Spring Boot level, and that request object level your body will be attached in the JSON format. So your body is going to be attached in the JSON format. Content here, so this content. Yeah. So this overall content is content type is what in this time content type JSON. So like that, this request, while clicking on sign up, automatically what will happen is the request will be created internally. It will take all this data and convert it into a respective JSON object. With respect to this properties, a JSON object will be created. Okay, and content type as JSON. So now what will happen, this is request object, this is request object. Now the moment you clicked on sign up, internally this will happen, and okay, that is how the front end team will implement the logic. And then this request object will reach to our Spring Boot application or backend application, nothing but where it will come, controller layer. So it's all reaches to the controller. It reaches to the controller. Now in this case, what controller will do is, it will do basic check, like what, something like user sign up, handler mapping and all, I'm not going again. And you send post also. So here, this buttons and all, they implemented like that. So with this information point of view, REST services existed, that's okay, that's a different story. Now existed. Okay, handler mapping will say like, yeah, this is existed in so and so controller class like that, and the request will go to so and so controller class. Okay. Now, what controller will do is, in this case, it will identify what content came as part of the request. So what content came? Content type as JSON. Then internally what Spring Framework is going to do is, it will invoke JSON API or JSON converter. Simply I can select JSON converter. So how it knows that it has to invoke JSON? Okay, how it knows that JSON converter, JSON to JSON API converter, how it knows that means yes. So this is how they will do that, content type JSON. So that's why it is invoking internally JSON API converter. And then what it will do is, it will take this JSON data and it will start creating the Java object. Now my point here it is it automatically doing this, invoking this JSON based on this content type means no. What you have to do here it is, whenever you are having content as part of request, JSON content as part of request, or any XML content also, that means simply whenever we have, the point here is like this, whenever we have a request body, whenever we have a request body, either it is a XML or JSON, either it is a JSON or XML, whatever it is. Okay, whenever client is going to send a request, or whenever you are implementing a REST service in the backend, you are expecting a body, right? So we have to use an annotation called as @request body annotation. Request body annotation. We have to use an annotation called as request body annotation. So that means you have to use now what it is after controller class. What we did, step number 2, define mapping annotation. Okay, that is also we did. Define mapping annotation. Now the third point is, so here is this REST service have has body, means answer yes, right? Yes, it is having body. This time, every time this REST service has to deal with these 5 values. So that means this REST service should handle this body. So that means this REST service is having body, means request body, nothing but in this case especially. Answer is yes. So that means what we have to do is, we have to take a annotation called as request mapping annotation. Sorry, request body annotation. Request body annotation. So what is the meaning of this request body annotation? Here it is. Let's try to understand. Okay, if you see here, come back here. Very simple, guys. Now this is the method, right? Now this is the JSON data will come. This is the JSON data will come. Example, values will change. Properties will never change. Okay, please remember the point. Property names will not change once while you are implementing the REST service. You have to prepare your REST service like properties point of view, common, always permanent. Property names, values will change. Dilip, Suresh, Naresh, so and so values like that. Okay, so that means ultimately this is the body it has to deal. Okay, so this is the body it has to deal ultimately, right? So here as a method parameter level, so that means where you have to use this annotation is request boundary annotation as a at a method parameter level. Method parameter level. So this annotation we are going to use at method parameter level. Now what is the meaning of method parameter here? Now why you need method parameter here? For example, what I said right now, what I mentioned here, internally controller layer, it will invoke the Jackson API jar file and it will ask, hey Jackson, could you please convert the incoming JSON to Java object, like that it will invoke. But to create this Java object, do we need a class or not? Do we need a class? It will create the object for a class. That means as a developer, we have to create a Java class. Do we need a class means? Answer is yes. So that means in this case, what will happen? The class what you created specific to JSON data format, that information you will give to the Jackson API converter. So that means now for example, this is the Jackson data, right? This is the Jackson data we have. Okay, fine. And then you are telling to the Jackson API, Jackson jar converter. So in this case, we are just making like we are invoking internally Spring Boot will invoke Spring MVC module. You don't need to do anything. It is invoking this Jackson converter. Why? What is the purpose? To convert this to Java object. So to create Jackson converter is ready to convert this JSON to Java object, but we have to give the class name into which object, which class. So what class, whether it is a predefined class or whether it is a user defined class, which object. So it will not create blindly. Okay, it will not create blindly. So in this case, we may create entity class, but as per guidelines, we should not create entity class. I'll come back to that point. So we have to create a simple Pojo class. So what we have to do is as a developer now, we have to create a request DTO class. I'll tell you what is the meaning of DTO. Simple point of view, just remember a request DTO class, nothing but a simple Pojo class only. Okay, DTO is a terminology representing some design pattern point of view. I'll explain that. So simple, what you have to do is you have to create a Pojo class. You have to create a Pojo class. Yes. Yeah, we have to create a Pojo class. Now, what are the rules you have to follow here? It is while creating the Pojo class. So this Pojo class has to be point number two. This Pojo class, that means this request class, Pojo class, should be aligned with incoming, okay, or expected JSON data format. JSON data format. Point number one, JSON data format. So that means what is this point is trying to say here, it is you have to create a Pojo class, and while you are implementing that Pojo class, you have to make sure it is aligned to the JSON data format. So that means if it is a regular JSON object, plain JSON object, you have to implement while implementing the Pojo class, you have to make sure that. So tomorrow maybe JSON may have arrays also. Based on that, you have to create the Pojo class. We will come back to that area. Now for time being, what I will do, one more rule is make sure JSON property names are aligned with Java. Okay, aligned with request Pojo class. I can write like this: request Pojo class. So what is the next point it is saying is we have to make sure JSON property names are aligned to the request Pojo class. So that means now, for example, public class user sign up request, like that I given the class. Assume like request something class name, a simple Pojo class only. Now what you have to do here it is, while implementing the class, what I said, this Pojo class should be aligned with incoming JSON data format. Now this is the expected JSON data format we prepared already. So now how many properties available? 5 properties available. First name, last name, email ID, mobile number, password. So you have to make sure here take 5 properties. Take 5 properties. So, and how will you decide which is a string value, which is a integer value, which is a boolean value? We discussed already. JSON is also having string numeric point of view, right? So the values data type belongs to what data type? Based on that you have to take. For example, first one, first name, right? So I'll take like private string. So why private why you are taking is encapsulation point of view. So string first name. So if you observe here, I taken JSON property name is exactly similar to Pojo class property name. Pojo class property name. First name. Exactly I taken same. So similarly define all 5 properties and just write setter getter methods. That's all you have to do. Okay. So what you have to do is in this case string last name and string email ID. As it is. String mobile number. String mobile number. And then string password. So now see here, I created a Pojo class like this. So assume setter getters. Setters and getters methods you implemented. So in this case, what you have to observe right now here it is. This Pojo class exactly matching to the JSON format. So first name, last name, last name as variable name, email ID, email ID. Order and all you no need to worry about it. You can give any order, but property names wise you have to make sure mobile number, password. And why you taken string? Because the sample data format when you decided requirement point of view, we decided all values are string values. Tomorrow assume while you are creating the service in your practice, like add a column like add a property like age colon 30 like that in this case. So then what will happen? It's an integer value, right? So then you can give like int age. So that means based on the JSON data types, you have to create your Java class. Or else vice versa, based on the Java class data types, you have to make sure your JSON properties and its values. It's up to you how you will consider it as JSON to Java, Java to JSON point of view, but a common alignment should be available. That's all. A common alignment should be available. So this is how I created my Pojo class. Okay, fine. Okay. So now assume I given this Pojo class name like this. User sign up request, right? Yeah. So now in this case, what Jackson controller will do is based on the JSON whenever it is received, it will invoke the JSON API converter and it will ask, hey converter, please convert the JSON to Java object and please utilize this class while creating the object. Like that it will give this class name. It will give this class name. But is it going to do automatically for every time, for every request, for every endpoint level? Tomorrow, if you are implementing 500 REST services, at every REST service level, is it going to identify a request class automatically, and is it going to be okay converted from JSON to Java? Means answer is no. So that's why what you have to do is here you have to utilize one annotation called as a request body annotation. So let's first create the class, and then just you will use this annotation along with this class name. So let's create the class first. What I will do is first example should be best example. So please practice thoroughly. If you have done this example, then you are good. Why it is located in two places? Okay, so cool. Now let me create a new class, Pojo class, right? So I'll give package names also, meaningful package names. So my point of view, it is a request class. And then user sign up request. User sign up request class. Like that. Okay. So now align to JSON format, you have to create this Java class, right? So sample JSON we prepared. So you can also do same kind of thing, guys. You just copy paste those things and make comments here, and based on that you can do that. Now first name string data. Okay, let's make it private. You know what are the rules and regulations you have to follow for Pojo class. Private you are using for the encapsulation point of view. These are all rules. Okay, similarly, now you may got one question, sir, why if I am not following same property name, what you have to do? I'll come back to that point. So all are strings only in this case for time being. If you want, I can add age also. Yeah, let's take age also, no problem. Age colon some age sample example 30 like that. So that means private. Okay, let's take first last name, email ID, and then mobile number, and then password. Okay, private integer age also. Integer age also. So sample example point of view, assume age also we added. Property name should be in the double quotes. I don't know how many of you gone through the JSON tutorial, or at least what are the rules I discussed. If you remember that, those are also enough. So property name should be always in the double quotes, and sample value I given 30 like that. Okay. So now based on this, so these values will change every time, guys. Stop payload point of view. So value might be in it. So sample point of view, we taken our data. So this is also a sample information like that. Just point of view. Okay, fine. Now what you have to do to make it as a poser class, definitely you need a setter getter methods. And to define that setter getter methods, we are using Lombok framework. Okay. Yeah. So if you are using data, setter, getters, and everything will come. If you want default constructor, all these things and all, it's up to your choice. Anyway, by default, default constructor will be available. Now what happened? You created a poser class. And what I mentioned is, now whenever this JSON data comes, this kind of JSON data with respect to this 5, 6 properties, this 5, 6 properties, okay, whenever this data comes, what we have to do is, we have to make sure that JSON data is converted to Java object. Which Java object? For that, we created a Java class. Which Java class? User sign up request. Now that you have to define here, and just import the package. So it's a simple method parameter, Java language, Java knowledge. So that means what is your intention is tomorrow if anyone sending requests user slash sign up as a request body level with this JSON data, so immediately this data, this all data should be converted to respective Java class object called as user sign up request. User sign up request. Now, yes, internally what who will do JSON converter? But JSON converter is invoked by internally Spring framework. Now this entire data automatically converted to Java object level. Now this entire data is converting to Java object point of view. Which Java class object you already given the information, right? So user sign up request class object. User sign up request object. So this is how this JSON data is finally converted to respective Java level. So for that you need a Java class. You have to create a Pojo class and that should be aligned to this one. Otherwise there is no point, right? For example, assume here you are not followed properly. That means that there is no point, right? So like that. Okay, and as well as what I said, it will not do automatically conversion from JSON to Java if you are not using annotation of the request body. Whether it is right or wrong, see, first of all, what I will do is sys out of, I'll print user sign up request reference. So internally toString method is there. We will see the data coming from front end is automatically, our client is automatically converted to Java object or not without request body annotation. Okay. So after that, I'll add the request body annotation. So now let's start my REST services. Nothing but let's start my application, run as Spring Boot application. See, once you got it, you know what you have to do. Until this, you got the data means next add the service layer, pass this object to service layer, and from there set this data to entity object and send it to repository. Repository will send it to DB and all. So that is all. Okay, cool. Now let's trigger this endpoint. What endpoint? Post mapping. Okay, so let's go back to the Eclipse, sorry, this Postman new HTTP request. So please concentrate here. So what is our endpoint now? Our endpoint will become post, and then localhost colon double eight double nine slash API until context path. After that controller path, if you have controller path. After that endpoint path. Guys, this formation you should know how to form the URL. Context path slash controller path slash endpoint path, like that. Okay, this is the URL. And this is this time must and should send some request and in the JSON data format. How to send it? So in this case, I can't implement right now front end immediately to show this example. So that's why what we are using in place of this front end point of view, we are using REST client testing tools. So for that, what you have to do is, okay, let's select post, step number one. And then step number two is enter the URL, enter the URL. Okay, fine. Now what? Body. So what I said, body. So you have to send body, right? Body. That means request, nothing but request body or body, whatever it is. And that to which format? JSON. So do we have sample JSON means? Yes, we are already have it, right? So I'll take this JSON sample. Based on this only we are doing all the implementation, right? So sample I have. So this information I'm passing, I have to send this request data to this endpoint level. So what you have to do in the Postman is, understand the guys, here you have an option called as body and raw text. I mean, just expand the drop down JSON. So here, the moment you selected body, so how to attach it is from the Postman point of view. So go to body, from the body raw, and from the raw select JSON. Okay, from drop down. Fine. Then once you selected JSON, then in the body, if you see here, this is the body. So copy paste that JSON here. So if your JSON is having any syntax issues, then Postman will show that issue, guys. For example, what is the syntaxes we understood? Every last property should not have any semicolon. I mean, sorry, comma. If I added comma, see Postman is giving error. That means invalid JSON format. So when you are sending the request, so note here it is, please make sure your payload, JSON payload format is valid. So for that you can do some Eclipse. I mean, in this case, what Postman itself will validate your JSON whether you are following all the rules or not. Or else you can compare from the online validators also. Just go to the Google. You can find out like JSON validator online. Okay. So if you go to JSON validator and if you're copying your JSON data here and validate, then it will give like, okay, your JSON, you are following all the rules and regulations. So if you forgetting given the comma here, now validate it, it's a invalid JSON. So that means my point here it is, if you are sending this invalid JSON and your controller logic, everything is good, but while testing, you should not send invalid. So that's why note is make sure your JSON okay structure, data structure, JSON body structure is always valid structure. If you given any invalid structure or you are not following proper JSON rules, then first of all compare it. So the moment you realize like it is a valid JSON, that means syntax wise your JSON is good. So this is our responsibility, guys. Making proper JSONs. As a developer, tomorrow when you are working for real-time projects, sir, who will create these JSON payloads means definitely we are only. As a developer, we have to create all these things. So we should have knowledge of and okay how to form the JSON data based on the requirement. Nothing as well as we should know JSON format rules and regulations. When it is JSON object, what is the JSON array rules? Like that, you have to know all these rules. Okay. So JSON valid. So that's what you have to make sure valid. So this is how you will make your content is in the Postman. Okay, so now what you're doing from this Postman point of view. So this is the client. Now once you are clicking on send button, what will happen? The request will reach to our Spring Boot application. So our Spring Boot application. So internally Spring Boot means it will come to the controller. It will come to the controller. Which controller, whatever the controller we written based on the request mapping, handler mapping point of view, post and use endpoint point of view, both are matching. So that means finally this method is going to be executed. But while executing, this time we given a request parameter, method parameter, like converting that JSON into this respective Java class object. Is it happening or not? See. So here, please remember, these are the points you have to note down. Body and raw and then JSON. So this is how you have to make sure you're making like you're sending the JSON data. See, while testing. Tomorrow, if you want to send the XML data and you want to test your REST service means JSON XML. Then you will pass here XML information like that. So JSON. Now if you observe here, headers, don't do anything with headers. What request to headers you are sending guys? JSON data. If you are selecting here XML, then your header content type became application/XML. So these headers generally will be available in servlets level also we have to understand HTTP headers. But anyway, we are sending JSON now. That's what I said here it is. Internally, a header will come like our content type JSON. And based on that, it is understanding you are sending the JSON data. If you are given content type slash content type XML, then controller will understand, okay, request contains XML data. Then it will involve XML converter. So based on the content type header, if it is you sent JSON, then internally it will invoke JSON converter. If you sent XML, then it will try to invoke XML converter like that. Okay. So very deep level I'm going, and you have to listen this topic again and again until you are getting clarification point of view. Okay. So now let's see automatically you are sending JSON data and controller is going to invoke JSON converter, and you are expecting the entire data being converted into this respective Java class object. So at this line itself. Okay, whether it is happening or not, let's see. Now send the request, click on send. What happened? 200. Okay, okay, I written null here, that's why. But go to logic. If you see here, what happened? Okay, so I'll replace this like user created successfully. Please log in now. Okay, later we will make this logic dynamically from the service layer, like what we did in the last time. Okay, so see here again, I'm sending the request, clicking on send button. Now observe here, you got the response, that's okay. But my point is it really converted that JSON to Java object? No. So that means by default, what is the point you observed right now? By default, okay, JSON to Java conversion will not happen. Even though you given class, it will not happen. So simply the point here it is, you have to use an annotation like request body annotation. Now see where I am using request body annotation. Before this, at the rate request body annotation. Observe this annotation, request body annotation. So what it is saying, this is the story it is saying. Request body annotation. So please maintain space guys. Don't attach class name and request body annotation. Maintain space. So now I added request body annotation. So what is this annotation is saying? See here. It's a very simple coding wise one line only, but explanation wise it took 1 hour. Okay. And what it is saying is just study this. I'll give our own language point of view also. So what Spring framework is saying in this case, this annotation indicating a method parameter should be bound to the body of web request. That's what I'm telling. So what this annotation now you are telling to the controller, by using this annotation you are telling to the controller, hey controller, whenever a request came for this REST service execution, or whenever a request came for this endpoint with this JSON payload, could you please convert that payload data into this respective Java class object? Like that, you are giving request body annotation. If you are not given request body, controller is not invoking internally JSON converter and not making this JSON data coming from client, nothing but Postman, is not being converted into respective Java object. To make sure that really converted 100% or to invoke JSON converter internally, you have to use this annotation. That's what the point is saying is. Okay, so the body of the request is passed through internally HTTP message converter. That's what I said. Message converter means in this case what? JSON converter. So in this case, the third party JSON converter. So tomorrow, if you are sending XML and you are dealing with XML, then HTTP message converter is nothing but XML converter, like that. Okay. So JSON converter. The body of the request is passed. So what internally then it will do is then the respective body. That means body means what? This body. Now this entire body coming from client. This entire body coming from client. Yeah. So now this entire body coming from client. Okay, comes here, right? Then it is passing via HTTP message converter, nothing but JSON converter to resolve the method argument depending on the content type of the request. So that means content type of request means what content you sent, JSON. That's why JSON. If you are sending XML, XML converter. So how it knows that what content type, you know that one header I shown you right now. So Postman will take care that header. You don't worry about it. So the header name is content type of the request. Okay, valid. I'll indicate later. I'll come back to. So this is what request body annotation. So now in this case, what you're trying to do is what we are making here. It is, hey converter, could you please convert the incoming JSON data to this respective Java object, like that you are using annotation. If you are not using, conversion is not happening. Even though you created a Pojo class exactly similar to JSON object, it's not being happening automatically. You have to add this annotation. Now see the magic. User created successfully. That means you got success response. That means from here the request went to controller. Controller. Now see the response. Now see the object really got created or not. Internally the mapping is happened or not. So before request body, yeah, before request body. Before request body, all are nulls. Nothing but you know that whenever a Java object got created internally, by default instance variables assigned with default values, right? So that's why you all see default values. In this case, what's happening? The moment you use a request body annotation, it is converting this respect to Java JSON object values. So this respect to JSON object values set it to properties level. Set it to properties level. See, last name Dilip, first name, last name, whatever it is, email ID, mobile number, password, age, all the values came. Okay. So now the story you know that. Now you what you will do? You will pass this data to service layer. So what you have to do for service layer? Create a class. Auto void of user account service. Repository and all I'll involve tomorrow. I mean, you know already. You can try automatically, but you have to create entity class and all. I'll come back to that. See, I'm creating service package, and inside service package, I'm creating a service class. So here what you will do, same method you can take public string user sign up. So is it a service class? No. Why? I did not add it, annotation at the rate. So this is common guys now. What you learnt in the last with respect to view layer point of view at that time, same thing. User sign up. Return. Okay. So here again you have to involve a repository. So we will do this tomorrow, but I'll show you one more REST service. We will understand again. We'll create one more also because this story we know that you know it. So I'll involve repository and all tomorrow. And here what I will do is user account service dot user sign up method. Okay, it's not having parameters. Let me create a parameter. So now which parameter I have to create? Controller is sending what data? This data, right? So I can define this type of parameter there also. That's it's a pure core Java. Again, don't confuse in this case. It's a Java object. A class, B class. A class calling B class method. So to call B class method and whenever it is having B parameter, same type of parameter you have to pass. It's a core Java thing. So now I'm passing same object to the service layer. Then it will give me some result, string result. And that result I'll return from here. So now what you're done, the data what you got, you pass it to the service layer. Now from the service layer, what will happen? Repository and then entity, set data into entity. This is all I'll explain tomorrow. We will continue this tomorrow point of view. But what I'm trying to, I'll concentrate on here itself. So now you understood what you have to do. Whenever you have a JSON body as part of request, you have to use this annotation and respect to Pojo class. Now, by summarizing all this, can you create one more REST service, second REST service quickly, step by step point of view? Yes. So let me give you the REST service. Okay. What I will do is add address. Okay. User address, something like that. So the point is address information. Add address point of view, you have to create a REST service. In this case, I want um client will send always data like first thing is area name or area. Okay. So and flat, yeah, flat number and then city and then pin code and then landmark and then district and then state and then country. So all or these are all. So now what is this? User is entering his address information. So assume in this case in the backend level address table is there. So like we discussed one to one, one to many mapping, right? So user table is user table, address table is address table point of view. Okay, like that. Okay, whatever it is. So this is the REST service you have to create. This is the REST service you have to create. So now in this case, area means in which area you are locating. Okay, in which area you are staying. Something like Amirpet. So on so your area name. Okay, like that. And flat number means assume something else. Okay, it's all flat information, flat details or whatever it is. Then you can give your building name, your house name, uh, or your house number. Like you will give right 123 slash something like that, comma flat number 101 something like that. Okay. For example, I'm telling you, city means you may give like your city name, Hyderabad, and pin code point of view 572. So like that, landmark point of view near something so and so area, near Y junction, something like that. And then district point of view, something, whatever district it is. I'm taking again Hyderabad only. And state point of view, TG, Telangana, whatever it is. Country point of view, India. So you can take your country like that. So what is the point here? It is this is the sample we are just expecting. This is our address. So your requirement is finalized now. These 8 details you have to take always. Now let's create a REST service for this. Now let's create a REST service for this. So do we need to create a JSON payload for this? Yes, you may create. It's up to your choice. Or let's start directly REST service itself. See here what I'm doing. Second REST service I'm creating, guys. Second REST service, right? So what you have to do first, let's take a method public string add address. So add address means you are adding a new address entry into DB level first time. So address record is inserted. So that means you can take post mapping. Okay, and path is slash address. Slash is address. So that means slash user slash address like that. Okay, cool. That is also cool. And then return, I'll make sure address added successfully, something like that. Okay. So service layer stories and all, you know that we will see anyway later. But now our concentration especially on these two lines. So what you have to do in this case, your assumption is in this case also clients always send JSON only, or you have to, if this REST service has to support only JSON request body. So that means JSON to Java. And do we have JSON payload ready with you? Are you created sample JSON? No, we are not created. So that means it doesn't mean like can't we create Java class means we can create. We can create. What I will do, see here. Based on the Java class, I will create JSON property names now. It's up to your choice. Now what I am doing is address request something like that. I taken a Pojo class. Okay, and data means just I'm adding setter getter method point of view Lombok. Now what you can take, I'll do like this. Private string copy paste. That's all. I'm not doing anything. I'm utilizing time. Okay, so simple. I'm just utilizing the time, guys. I'm not doing anything. All are right. Landmark also. I'll take like string only. Pin code. Yes, I can take it as an integer. City. Yeah, it's all definitely string value. Even JSON point of view also like that. Flat details. So string value. So total, I have 8 properties. Now it's a poser class. It's a poser class, right? Now what you have to do? At the rate request body followed by which object this time it has to convert this object. So controller level request body and you are giving like address request parameter name you can take anything abc etc. So import this package. So I imported the package. Okay, address request user sign up request. So now yes, your REST service is done. Now automatically what will happen from the postman, if I am sending again one more request, new HTTP, what is my request post and what is my URL slash user slash address, right? From previous copy. Yeah. So in this case, slash user slash address. So create REST service means post and followed by this is the endpoint we created. Now let's create the JSON payload. How to create JSON payload? This time what you did, you created Pojo first. You created Pojo first. So that means what I can see, like what I can do, that's what I told you. You can create Pojo if you already have JSON based on the JSON property names. Or you can create JSON if you are already implemented Pojo based on the Pojo. So this time what I did, Pojo class I created first. That means address request. What are the properties? These are the properties. These are the properties. Right? Now based on that, can we create JSON? Yes, obviously, right? So how to create JSON? Just take the JSON object, open curly, end curly braces. So here also I'm just utilizing the time by copy pasting. Area is property name. So these are all things you have to take care, guys, as a developers. I'll show you some other shortcut also, but you should have hands on. That's why I'm not showing all those. In real time, it's very difficult, right, to do all these things, JSON payloads, which is a endpoint, which is a post method, which is a get method. So for that, we have some other utility library. Colon, all are colons, and everything is in the double quotes. And then sample data I'm giving. Area is something like I'm giving Kukatpalli. Okay, flat details. I'm just giving like so comma. So comma flat details. I'm just giving something like near so and so area, near bus station or whatever it is. Something so and so ABC like that, and flat 101 something. So in everything in the double quotes because it's a string value. Comma. So if you observe here, area flat details, that's okay. String city. And then I'll give something like Hyderabad, comma pin code. So property name in the double quotes, and then I can give something like 572 and landmark something opposite to something so and so mall or whatever it is. No district. I can give again Hyderabad itself as a district, comma state. Yeah, district in the double quotes. State also in the double quotes. Colon. So I'll take like TG and country like India. So it's a string value, India. Okay. So last one should not have any comma. So these are all rules and regulations you have to remember. Now what we did in this case, based on the POJO, you created JSON. In previous point of view, based on the POJO, we created Java class. It's up to your choice. As a developer, you can take any approach. But generally, I'll show you some Swagger API documentation concept is there, but I'll not show you right now. And okay, so if you are taking that, then automatically these JSON payloads will come, guys. Okay, so these are all automatically generated. How to generate automatic JSON payloads from our request POJO classes or response POJO classes? I'll show you that. There is a library available in the Spring framework itself, Spring Boot itself. Then you don't need to prepare all this manually, especially JSON payloads. Java classes you have to prepare based on the requirement, but from those Java classes, automatically you can create the JSON payloads like that. We'll see that later. Now what you have to do? Take this body raw JSON and then enter your JSON payload. So if you are having any problems in this JSON messages, syntax problems and all, your postman will show mostly validation. See, it is saying like red line. That means your JSON is having some issue like that. So if your JSON is a valid JSON, then only you have to make sure sending the request. Now, okay, cool. Beautify. Beautify means just it will arrange in the index point of view. Okay. Now what I'm doing, I'm going to click on send button. The moment clicking on send, what will happen? It will go to the our Spring Boot application and internally dispatches are late will ask the controller with post and user address, any combination, anything available or not. Yes, available. Okay, with post mapping means post, address means address. Yes, it's available. Which controller class? This controller class. And which method? This method. Now internally again what you're doing? Request body. So that means now what will happen? This entire JSON data is going to be converted into respective Java class object. User provided. Sorry, address request. See why it is printing all the information like earlier, like this is internal. It is overridden toString method, guys. If you are not, how toString method came means we added lombok dot data. So internal it is convert. It is having toString method also. So that's why you are seeing that message. Otherwise, you will see like class name at the rate hash code format. If you don't have that point of view. So if you are create, so you know that right? How to create setter getter methods. If you are creating manually setter getters and if you are printing that reference, now you will see like class name at the rate hash code. But here we are overridden the toString method because of at the rate data annotation like that. That's all Java knowledge. Okay, so let's send the request now. So start the server. Everything is good. Let's send the request. What happened? Address added successfully. You got the response. If you observe here, what happened? All the data what you sent JSON as a JSON from the client, area Kukatpalli, flat details near bus stand, ABC flat 101, city equal to Hyderabad, pin code, landmark, district Hyderabad, state equal to TG, country equal to India. So that means what happened? Yes, that's what. This entire information, once you are clicking on send, this entire JSON payload went to Spring Boot application. The moment it went to Spring Boot application internally, what it is doing based on the content type. What is the content you sent? JSON. So we sent content to what? JSON. From here I shown you, right? So that header also will go to Spring Boot application. Header will go to that header. I mean Spring Boot application will go to the content type and it found internally JSON. Then what it will ask, what it will do is it will invoke the JSON converter and it will ask converter please convert this JSON payload to respective Java class called as address request. And why it is asking? Because you added at the rate request body. If you are not added request body, then internally Spring Framework will not invoke JSON converter. Why? You are not asking. You are not expecting to be. You are not expecting this JSON data like this JSON data converted to a respective Java object. You are not expecting that. That's why you are not added annotation. Then it will not invoke converter. That means this mapping is not happening. JSON data setting to the respective address. When the moment you added request body annotation, then this process is happening internally. It will invoke JSON converter and it will ask, okay, developer given request body, let's then please map this data to respective address Java class, respect to Pojo class like that. Then internally what it will do is it will create object for this address request and it will take area equal to Kukatpalli, flat details equal to like that. It will create a Java object internally. Do you remember scope equal to singleton, Spring Bean scopes, singleton, scope equal to prototype. Then I said we have few more scopes like request, session, right? So those we can test only in the web module layer. So that means in this case that request body annotation level, whatever the class you are using, internally container is creating object for that class and it is assigning scope as a request. That means for every request, a new object is going to be created, guys. Now, for example, another person entering his information. Okay, so something like New York. So near so and so terminal or whatever it is. I don't know that. So something like, again, I'm writing some other information, New York, and something zip code generally they used to call. So something landmark near something station, whatever it is. And then I don't know. So generally, is maybe if it is a India-based application point of view, we given. So generalized point of view. So it's all about, see, property names you are not changing. We are changing only content. So I'm just giving like United States of America like that. Now I give it. Now I'm sending the request. You added successful. So if you see here, what happened? So the data is converted to New York. I mean, internally again, one more request. Now if you are sending, keep on sending the request, 4, 5, 6, every time same process will be repeated here. So all requests are handled now. Now simply you will pass this information to service and service will pass to repo and repo to DB. This we know that. So repo point of view, you have to create again two things. One is interface plus entity class. So this story we know that. So the concentration of REST services understanding or implementation is all about, the story always happens in these two lines only, guys. The entire REST services training story is always about these two lines only, because this REST is, we know from JPA onwards. Whatever we are doing, we are already doing from JPA onwards. From here, there is no point of, I mean, there is nothing like something related to request and response, especially this area like that. Okay. So that's why I said, please prepare things right away like that from day one onwards. So that in future you will not feel difficult, like you are learning something difficult. The people who practiced all these things olden days back itself, then they will feel like, oh, this is very simple. Once you know these two lines, what's happening, then you will feel like, okay, done. I'm done with REST API implementation. Such a way you have to be confident. So such, if you want to get that confidence means you have to practice the things without postponing. Okay. So what I will do is I'll stop this session here itself, and this and all I'll take tomorrow. So what we understood today is what is the request body annotation, and what is happening with request body annotation internally, so it's important or not, and as well as what we understood is how to write JSONs by using JSON's POJOs, as well as we understood like how to write POJOs, sorry, how to define JSONs from the POJOs. Two ways we understood. First example, JSON to POJO. Second example, first we written POJO and based on that JSON. And how we are sending JSON data from the Postman also we understood. So this is how we are going to test it. Post and all. Okay. So this data will be permanently saved, guys, in your workspaces point of view. If you see here, it's there. You can after opening tomorrow also you can see that your old services data history and all. In the Postman you can see that it's history. That's all. Okay. So my suggestion is, take a big data like your biodata point of view, or let's take like first name, last name, email ID, mobile number, password, age, date of birth year, something like, are you past, true or false, a boolean property, uh, yeah, boolean property, and your average marks, something like that. You can take some double value. So my suggestion here it is, prepare assignment point of view. We are going beyond the time. So assignment point of view, what I would like to tell you is, what you have to practice is implement a REST service and properties should have below data types. So it's up to your choice what you will take, Instagram profile or Facebook account, Gmail account, like that you can take anything. But I want these properties. So string mostly will come definitely, and cover one integer, cover one floating value, double point of view also, and one boolean also. Okay. So in JSON, you don't have any single character point of view like that. Only JSON, you have only three types: numeric, string, boolean, usually. basic property data types. So in Java point of view, numeric point of view, int and double long you can take. That's why I've given these things, string and as well as boolean. Okay, if your JSON level, if you have single character like F male, female, something like that, M, F or something like that, then you have to consider it as like a string only in JSON point of view. Just considering all these things, minimum take, my point here it is, minimum take 10 properties guys. Minimum take 10 properties. Don't try a REST service with 2-3 properties and don't create a Pojo class with 2-3 properties. Take minimum 10 properties. One example, practice with quality, practice with understanding. Okay, so what's happening? What is the diagram I given and what is the flow I explained you? And if you're given request body, what's happening? If you're not given request body, what's happening? Do experiments also. While you're practicing, the best thing is what you have to do is what I explained in the class, you should not do that. You don't need to do that. You already know that because I explained. Beyond that, so beyond what you have to do. So I said don't give JSON payload wrong payloads or invalid payloads. For example, if you're given in comma, if you're not given comma, it's an invalid payload. I said don't give. If you're given, what will happen? That's what you have to get it. If you're not given, okay. If you given wrong JSON payload, it's a wrong JSON. You forgot to give comma. Even though I'm sending the request, then what happened? Something you got, right? So now controller is saying bad request. So what is the meaning of bad request? Such a way you have to explore the knowledge. Dilips are told like, don't give the invalid JSON. Okay, I'm not giving. That it's not a matter. If you are not giving, in a happy path, it is working. It's working. Now the next question is, if I'm not following the rule, if I'm violating the rule in this case, then what Spring Boot is saying? See now what Spring Boot is saying. Hey man, what data you sent? It is a wrong data. I mean wrong syntax. Bad request. Like that Spring framework is giving. See what HTTP message saying is JSON parser error, unexpected character, something like that. It is saying like ultimately you given wrong data, unexpected, something like that. Something bad. Your request is not success. You got some error. So why you are not followed the syntax? So such kind of thoughts you have to get it. Such kind of things you have to do on your own, and you can explore things on the Chat GPT or you can explore on the Google. If you got any exception, try to get resolve it by using Chat GPT, Google, all these things. So that's all I'm expecting from you. So and let's connect on tomorrow. And what I will do tomorrow is quickly we will make sure the same data what is coming from the postman point of view, right? So we will involve tomorrow. So now we are clear with controller layer. I'll involve service layer and repository layer as well as DB also tomorrow. And then we will see few more REST services with other JSON formats like JSON arrays, all these things, and as well as response body also. JSON as a response body like that. We will discuss one by one.